Hello, I'm Ezekiel Dashow, and I'm going to draw this portrait of William Z. Villain. Is a performing musician. As far as I know, he's American and mostly plays in Paris. But I saw this portrait online and asked him if I could use it, and he said yes. So, got a nice profile portrait, and so I think it's a nice opportunity to just focus on a profile and sort of the shape of the face, and not really worry about the eyes and too much of that. It's also it's got a good expression. So I'm going to start by I'm going to take the point where his hair meets his head at the top, and just extend that toward his nose and eyes. And then still using a 4B pencil so that the shading can go quickly. And right now it's that blocking phase, the building phase of the portrait. And we just want to get a general sense of where the shapes are in the picture. Oh, nothing too complicated. Just got a little bit of a mustache there, so that'll make shading that area pretty straightforward. And then this is kind of important section here. There's an angle that is formed by the top of his bottom lip and the bottom of his, I guess, mustache or top lip. This angle is important, and the placement of this point is also important. So if you know that, the point here goes about here on his nose, you're looking straight up, and the angle is about, it's almost a 90-degree angle, pretty close, maybe like an 80-degree angle or something, this angle here. Small things, but pretty important if you want the picture to look real. And so then his mouth goes there, and he's got his thumb, and I want to get this just right. He's got his thumb and his microphone, and he's singing, and so I want to make sure that I get the size of the thumb right in relationship to his face. And that can be a little tricky, but for now we'll just go with the same method that we've been doing this whole time. If you've been following my show, and if you're new, welcome. It's the same method of just building up the shapes and looking for these places like to triangulate our points. So this would be the microphone here, and then his finger comes up here, and again, size is very important with these hands in relationship to the face. If they're too small, they just stick out really bad, and if they're too big, they also stick out really bad. And by sticking out, I mean the inaccuracy pulls a lot of focus away from the rest of the drawing and forces the viewer to confront the inaccuracy, and that's not what we want. You don't have to be laser accurate everywhere in the picture, and sometimes inaccuracy is actually helpful, like with hair. Oftentimes, like in paintings and drawings, hair that's given a more artistic, less accurate treatment will look more beautiful, like in the paintings of Sargent and many others. And from across the room, it'll look more realistic than it would if you drew it really accurately up close and then got a microscope out and made everything perfect, and then went across the room and looked at it, and it would just look kind of blah. Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit. The point is, with the hands, you definitely want the shapes to be right and the sizes to be right. So as we go along with building up the hands, it's, just constantly checking everything and saying, oh, this is where the pinky hits here, so you just keep that there. And for instance, here's this knuckle here. So then in relationship, this one's just a little bit down. And then that's all it is, really. I like to do it like sort of free and not really use the measuring tools. But if you want to go for that really, really photo accurate look, by all means, get the protractor and the ruler and stuff, and you can check all of the angles and measure all of the distances and all that. And if you like the results it's producing for you, then that's great. Because really, I mean, it's just really about getting to the water. We might have a different pathway of getting there, but we're going to get there. And so building up his fingers here, maybe a little thicker on the, and then the photo just cuts off, so we can just kind of let that trail off. I'm not going to attempt to build from my mind and extend all that. It's just, I think, more useful to keep on keeping on for the rest of the picture. So let's focus in here quickly. And again, using these points of reference is really key. And the farther we get into the drawing, the more points of reference you'll have on your picture that you can use to build your work up. And it's kind of like climbing a little bit. Like, to get higher, you need a point of contact, and to get to the next point after that, you need to, have another point of contact and keep three of your points of contact at all times, and moving up one at a time. The tricky parts are when you have to make jumps and leaps and you don't have a lot of reference points, and there are ways to create your reference points and so forth. But so, and then we have the shading here. We could kind of block that in quickly. And so his chin, let's look at this. Let's pretend for a second his hand isn't really there. Just kind of imagine you're drawing the chin there for a second. And you see that it connects right here by his thumb. And it's kind of an angular chin there, and a little bit of shadow. And so here's a point where I'm talking about outer space. It's just white paper and there's nothing else over here. And so this line is like traveling toward the outer limits or whatever. And it's easy to start getting really inaccurate really quick if we start working like that without other points of reference. So maybe for now we can, feel reasonably confident about the length of this arc here. And if we look at the negative space, this shape between his shoulder and the bottom of his hand, that can help us draw get the sense of where his jacket is, as well as, you could just look at the line of his jacket, and it might be simple for you to see that. But if you're having any issues with it at all, I recommend looking at this shape here, and I would almost liken it to it kind of looks like a shark's fin or something, with an extra point here or something. I don't know exactly. It doesn't really look like anything in particular, but you can see that shape and you can use that to your advantage when you're So then that becomes his neckline here. And so we've got his hair up here. Let's see. And the hair kind of cuts off too, so we can kind of, yeah, you know what? Before we get into the hair, let's get into the eyes a little bit. We've got this ridge or this curve here where his nose ridge begins, and he's got the sort of, he's singing, so he's got his a little bit of furrow in his brow, and the photo is not extremely high resolution, and I apologize for that, but I think in a way it kind of helps us as we go, because it forces us to deal in broader strokes and shading and have it be a little it's easier to not get lost in the details, and that's good because it'll give the picture a good look, the portrait a good look, especially from a distance. So his eyebrows here, or his eyelashes here, rather, he's kind of got long eyelashes. And then this darkness here comes down. And maybe he's got a little more shadow around his nostril than I originally had there. And the bottom of his nose is definitely darker. You can see sort of some of his nostril, and that goes out to here maybe. And there's this sort of bright line like at the edge of his nose. I want to keep that, retain that. And it's pretty, this is from the wraparound lighting, and it's pretty slender, and it's pretty well defined, so I'm just going to draw a line there to kind of block it out. And get into some of the shading here. And it's got a little bit of the mustache here, so like I said, that'll kind of make it a little straightforward, because we know tonally that it's just much darker than the surrounding area. And here we go with this dark, important spot. I should have maybe said that before I started drawing it. But this shape here right under his mustache, I can't stress how important the shape is to getting the picture to look real. And so I'm going to do my very best to get it right. And it's really dark. And it's just one of those shapes, like that shape in the, in the eyes sometimes, or with the whites of the eyes, and sometimes with it's just with different elements of different objects or portraits, or whatever reference you're using there. Sometimes these places in the picture that are really important, they don't sometimes look like the most important places, but it's like one of those things of, like we were talking about earlier with like with the hands, if that place is incorrect, it's just gonna look like a glaring mistake. And we certainly don't want that. So let's see, under his lip, getting toward his chin, it's pretty dark, and his chin's pretty clean shaven, it looks like. But there's this sort of roundedness to the shadow there, and let's start getting into the hair and toward the ears and stuff. So let's we've got this point at the top of the hair, and the front of his hair is kind of doing this. And so we'll just gently do this. I'm not pressing very hard. We can err on the side of too far away, but we can, and then you can bring it in closer if you need to later. But, you know, try to make it accurate as we go here. But it's better to be too far away and be able to bring it in than be too close to the eyes and stuff and have to push it out, because that would just take a lot more work and might require getting out an eraser or something like that. You don't want to do that. So his hair is the general, you know, flow of it. I'm not drawing each hair here. I'm just giving a sense of the directional stuff, and later we can add some shading that'll kind of realize that a little more. And then about here I'm seeing his headphones start. I'm going to try to get those in. I'm going to be pretty casual about it. I don't want to get too deep into the headphones, but I just want to show that you can use these techniques to just draw any element of your picture. And if you run into something like mechanical headphones or whatever, don't worry about it. Just treat it like it's anything else that you would draw. It's, you know, pretty loose, just blocking it in here. Just drawing what I see. And so I've got this shape down here a little bit. And then, you know, some circles, and let's kind of just gently, lightly do this so that we can make all the corrections we want to later. This inner piece of the headphone here sits up by the hinge of the piece, and these come down, and they're basically circles, but they are at a slight angle, so I don't want to say just draw circles here. But you can see it's like drawing everything else that we've drawn. It'll come together, and as you shade in these forms, you'll have the points that you need to make the corrections you want. And I mean, later if we want, we can come back and sharpen these up, but the main thing is that we have like the frame sketched in, and just, you know, just approach it like it's anything else. Sometimes, especially, it even wasn't very long ago where I would run into situations where, like, someone would have glasses on in a portrait I wanted to do, and it would just frustrate me because I would approach it like it was really hard, and I just had my own mind block about it. Like, I was like, these are super hard to draw, it takes forever, I can never get them quite right, always messes up the look and all this stuff. I think I got better at drawing glasses, actually, by drawing glasses of water and with ice in them, and just forcing myself to look at how the shine and the light and the ice and stuff is. Weirdly, that actually helped with drawing glasses for me personally. Like, it just forced me to realize how the light was working on this object, and that I didn't really spend a lot of time looking at usually. And it just helped. I don't know exactly how, but it changed. It altered my approach to glasses, and then I would just treat glasses like they were glasses of water with ice in them instead of just glasses, and made it much easier for me to draw things like glasses and stuff. I don't know. There are elements of portraiture that continually pose challenges. And certainly, you know, the introduction of mechanized, machine-made objects is a challenge. So we don't have the freedom of, the freedom that we have when we're looking at an organic object with no straight lines and no manufactured curves. So maybe his headphone even pulls out a little farther this way. It's pretty dark, so there's a lot of leeway. And you see how his sideburn here on mine is a little bit thicker than the one in the picture. Like, that's okay. I don't think that's a place where laser-like accuracy isn't really going to pull any focus at all. And his hair's there, and you don't have to suspend your disbelief at all to see that headphone there and think, that's where it is and where it should be in the picture. And so let's just keep on rolling with the back of his hair. It's pretty bright. There's this like wraparound light again, but it is darker. The shapes here, the headphones are contrasted by the hair. The hair is actually much darker, so the headphones on my picture are pretty dark, but the hair needs to be darker still. And so you can see, like, for this part here on the back of his head, definitely rather than drawing hairs, like I can draw this, like, I don't know, it's a squiggly, like Y shape kind of. That'll look more like hair than if I go in there and try to draw hair by hair. So let's try connecting this here. And let's get the collar in, and the tie, and let's up here behind the hair, a little more light hair, some dark hair. This space here for where the collar wraps around, this little and there we go. And yeah, so let's talk about some of the other little elements to see the details. Looks like there's a guitar strap here, and it is a nice feature because it's pretty light. We'll add something interesting. And then there's also the cord that his headphones is attached to. So let's just draw that in. And I'm seeing it as darker on this side here than it is on this side here. And that's stuff like little details like that are one of the reasons I chose this picture. But also because it's a nicely done portrait of a young man who is being creative. And so let's get the skin tones shaded in before we call it a picture and sign it and go home. And we see, especially along the cheeks here, this plane here. And I could thicken darken up his mustache a little bit. It's a little thicker than what I have so far. And his nose, a good place to start this curvy shadow here. And I'm going like a mix between cross-hatching and these little circles. And I want to retain the backlighting and the different layers of shadows too. So let's look by his eyes. There's more to do here. Certainly, he's got there's some shadows of expression here where he's singing, and then to up here where his brow is furrowed and the camera's picking that up a little bit. Bring his hairline in a little bit so that it's not so receding. His hairline's not receding, definitely. I'm darkening the hair up here because it is quite dark in the picture, but as well as I shave the forehead, I want to have a relative value that's closer to correct than the one that I have now. Because if I go in there and shade the forehead and it's next to this really light colored hair, it's going to look too dark to my eyes. That's sort of a personal preference thing, but you know, the darkness is established by contrast. So, like we've all seen those optical illusions where like a gray square is on a black background and then the same gray square is on a white background, and they look very different to us until we learn that they're the same color gray or whatever, or same value gray. So it's a sort of similar idea, and that's why I just veered away from working on the forehead for a moment to touch up the hair. And it goes back to this we've talked about before in other videos too, the principle of sort of working on the whole picture at once rather than working on one piece at a time and then moving along. You know, for painting and stuff like that, sometimes you have to just work on one piece at a time because of the way that maybe you're doing a watercolor or something and it's got lots of details and it needs the kind of approach where you are just completing one detail and then moving on to the next and stuff. But I find with drawing, it's much better to kind of not pull back and look at the whole picture as often as you can. It's definitely the temptation is to get pulled into the little details. And I can bring the darkness or the depth of the shadow up a little more. There's lots of nuance and subtlety to the shadow. The more you look at the picture, the more you'll see. And sorry, apologize in advance for not having a bigger file format to post on this one, but hopefully it's still a valuable exercise for anybody who's participating or watching. And now, I think if I was going to complete this in a gallery setting or something, I may consider doing a background. But I may keep this as a sketch for this video, and we're going to keep it on the shorter side. And let's get to this line in here. It's kind of cool. And then let's go ahead and treat the suit. And some shadows there. Some shadows there. And some third round of shadows, like along the edge here. And oh, his shirt's black too, so that's nice. Or reasons to shade. Gotta love that. So let's get that value in there, and then just kind of looking at some of the other subtle shadows in with it. And another round of shadows over here. I love this part of the process because, especially with like these clothes and stuff like that, it just gives you just so many opportunities to do these like long, broad strokes, and I really enjoy the best aspects of cross hatching. It sounds so weird saying that. For some reason, I used to just despise cross hatching, but I've learned to really love it, and I'm no master of the technique, that's for sure, but the more I do it, the more I love it. And it's so good for just applying the depth of the value that you want in the place that you want, without overworking the paper, or having it look really weird, or having to rely on your manual dexterity and your hand control to like press a certain amount of pressure in any given spot. Because rather than relying on how much pressure you're putting on it, you're relying on just the sort of even pressure all the time, and just the layering of the. So now let's do a couple highlights, and we've got the lighter lights and darker darks in the hair here, and it's an opportunity to use the sharp side of this pencil that we've been sharpening up by shading for the last few minutes, and then we'll pretty much call it a portrait. Like this area here, definitely want to fix that up a little bit. And mainly what it needs is there's a little bit of a shadow kind of coming down from the headphones, or something, some other source, maybe the headphones though, as it definitely looks much darker in here. And actually, now that I think about it, this can help the headphones really pop a little bit here. So, if you haven't checked out the music of William Z. Villain, I highly recommend it. It's really special stuff, and I don't see any performers out there quite like him that are touring on the circuit. And if you have a chance to catch him in the States, consider yourself lucky. Go hear him. And if you're watching from France, you'll probably get many more chances to catch him, because I think that's where he's doing most of his work these days. But he is American, and so for the viewers in the U.S., like I think he recently played a place in Michigan or something, and anyway, put my plug in for his music because it's really cool and it's original sounding. Good music is definitely hard to find these days. Okay, so the hand is too white. Pretty much finish that up here, and we'll sign it and be done. And maybe some little more darkness here. Get this curve just right. Okay, so I'm gonna be pretty, like I said earlier, casual about the hand. And as we go here, we can see this shading here, and none of it's white, so we can go ahead and shade a good chunk of it. We see this part of his palm, and can just gauge that from drop down from his pinky, and see this area a little darker, and then just going to go ahead and look for any places where the shadows need to be deeper, as per usual. Oh, this could be darker here. And I suppose we should do a little bit of this work on the microphone so it's not just a white ball. But there's this band kind of there. And then for the rest of it, I think I'll just shade it in, but we'll kind of use a little bit more of a mechanized method than a normal method. Yeah, like that or something like that. I don't want to get into the details. It kind of looks like chainmail, if you've ever drawn chainmail, or something I drew a lot when I was a little kid, playing D&D and so forth. All those characters had to have some chainmail on somewhere. But now that we've got it, basically to that point, I think you can just shadow like another object, and so the finger here is casting a darker shadow of on the mic. And let's quick get these fingers in a little bit. They can be, some people with fingers are like how I was with glasses. They can be kind of challenging. I think it's just, getting your eye to look at it like it's any other shape or any other thing, and kind of taking away the sort of stigma that your brain puts on the complexity. I don't know if that makes much sense, but there are all sorts of ways to breaking these two down into shapes that are easier to process too. Another way too is just to find anatomy books and draw the skeleton of a hand, and looking at the skeleton of a hand for a while, like do 3 or 4 of those practice drawings on that. You come away drawing hands much better, because you just won't have any questions about like what's happening inside that makes it look like it does on the outside, and that can be a big help too. If I was working with somebody who was younger, I would maybe recommend drawing a series of connecting not cones, what's the word I'm looking for, cylinders or cubes or rectangular solids or something, because that's easier for them to process, I think, than for a beginner level. It's much easier to process that than like all of the complex bone structure of a hand. And then you could you could show them how to draw a hand by saying like, well, this is really just this rectangular solid here, and so we'll draw a solid here and shade it, and then it attaches to another one, and then and another, and so forth, until you've gotten them to a place where they're comfortable and they don't need to think about it in terms of simple geometric shapes as much as that's kind of, I think, how I started. Because when I first started drawing hands, like I think like anybody who first starts drawing, they stick figure hands basically. It's not. But yeah, practice, but more than just practice too. It's like kind of seeking out what works for other artists who can draw it in a way that you like, and because sometimes it can be a little bit like cooking or something. It's like you may practice something all the time, but unless someone shows you a little bit how, it's gonna not really your technique's not really going to do the jumps that you want it to do, or the steps or whatever. But there are more than enough great artists working around on YouTube that are just basically giving away their expertise. I tend to avoid the ones who are like selling programs and things like that, because it's like, frankly, I don't have time to deal with a salesman. I just want to learn how to draw. But I shouldn't bag on them. I mean, if someone wanted to pay me to show them how to draw, I probably wouldn't say no. So there's this kind of cool, I'm running the video long, but there's this kind of cool shading right here, and then you kind of lose that shade, and then it comes back right there. Little details like that can just really help. And before we go, I want to finish up on his cheek here. This lighter part of the shading here, where his and then again, let's got these areas where the shading could stand to have a little bit of a multi-directional, so it's not looking so monodirectional and like it's moving. And we've got this much darker shadow here. There's a little bit of light there. And let's darken this up too, because it's definitely darker in the picture than what I had on my. It's time to ask this question of, is what I have as subtle or more too, not subtle enough for whatever. I mean, that's always a good question to ask. Is what I'm doing on my paper is it what I see, or is it what I think I see, or was I not thinking enough about it? And you don't want to, it's a fine balance. You don't want to overthink it, but you also don't want to just space out. I mean, it's an activity that does part of the fun of it is that it lets you think. Let's bring this shade in his neck up a little more. So in some of these areas, I'm just looking for angles that I haven't done yet. So when I cross hatch them again, I know that there are some angles that I rarely use or underuse or whatever. So I can just go back over with those and hit them with a little bit of the circles to even it out if I need to. And let's go ahead and do a few last touches on the hair here. We've got these shapes and things that'll just looking where I see not enough darkness or too much darkness, or I want the darks to be black. I don't want to have them looking too gray, especially in this area here, because it's one of the darker areas on the picture, but it's in terms of having like a wider gray scale and a longer range of values. And then that I've darkened those up, I should come over here and give that a little more. I'm pressing in kind of hard at this point because the paper is just only going to accept so much. And here around the headphones. Maybe bring the headphones out a little more here. And I'm getting to that point where I think I'll feel like it's done in a second. But sorry, this video is running a little long. I might break it up into chunks, I'm not sure. I almost left that flat white. How did that happen? Okay. Well, we're getting to that point. I should just wrap it up. I hope that, be my end of the drawing speech, I really hope that this was a useful drawing exercise for you and that it was a good use of your time. Thanks for being with me today, and hope to see you again soon. I'm probably going to focus on portraits for a little while. And do a little project and try to keep posting some portraits and maybe do a few animals or objects, or like if I find there's anything, I mean, to specific that I want to talk about, maybe post some of that. But I think I'm kind of getting into the portraits for a little bit. And immortalize the people in our world, in YouTube videos and stuff like that. So yeah, end of the drawing speech. Thanks again. I'm Ezekiel Dasho, and see you next time.